So what's interesting and challenging about this watercolor is that much of what you see in the pictured landscape isn't even real. It's either exaggerated or even imagined by the artist. So the challenge in this case study is to distinguish what is real in the landscape versus what isn't. This case study is a watercolor by Copley Fielding titled Loch, Katrine and dated 1852. Loch Katrine is a lake in the Scottish Highlands. Now, as I said in the introduction, I believe that at least some of the landscape elements that are pictured in this watercolor might not be real. Perhaps they're exaggerated in height, or perhaps they're even imagined by the artist. But regardless of whether they're real or not, I need to describe what I see in this watercolor. So what I see is a landform that the artist was standing on. He appears to be looking down the center of the lake toward tall mountains in the distance. The tallest peak is called Benvenue. And there appears to be hills that are sloping down toward the lake on both sides. So let's now look at a map of Loch Katrine to see if we can identify specific locations along the shoreline where the artist could have been. At the top of the map, you see an arrow pointing to a small circle, which is the peak of Benvenue. This white arrow is coming from a location on the opposite shoreline pointing toward the peak. That is about the closest distance to Benvenue, and it is still 9,800 feet away. Now, this is not the correct location, and let me show you why. I'm going to try to align it, an image, a Google Earth image from this location with a watercolor. I've outlined the landforms on the watercolor so we can make a better assessment of the alignment, and you can see there is no alignment. Nothing aligns. And this is because, other than the fact that we're looking toward Benvenue, it doesn't fit the description. We're not looking down the center of the lake. We're looking across the lake. There are no sloping hills on both sides. There are no landforms on both sides. There's just water. But we didn't even have to try to align it with a Google Earth image because we already knew just by looking at the map. And in fact, there aren't any locations along this shoreline that fit this description. They are all looking across the lake, and none have sloping hills on both sides. And if I continue down this shoreline, I'm now bumping against the shoreline, and if I go even further, I have a hill in front of me, and I can't even see Benvenue. So there is nowhere along this shoreline that could possibly be the correct location for the artist. And of course, it can't be on the opposite shoreline because the lake would be behind us. So where was the artist located? There is only one location on this entire lake that fits this description, and it is here. From this location, we are looking toward Benvenue. We are looking down the center of the lake, and we have shoreline on both sides with sloping hills. So let's see if we can align a Google Earth image from this location. And there are a few landforms that align, including the landform that the artist was standing on, a hill sloping down on the left, and a small dark green landform on the right that happens to be a peninsula. However, all the other sloping hills are imaginary. They don't exist. And the height of the mountain in Benvenue are perhaps 3 times what their actual height is. But the shape of the outline is nearly identical to the shape of the actual mountain. What you are looking at is exactly what the artist was looking at when he sketched this watercolor. It just doesn't look like the watercolor. So exactly where was the artist? I'm going to show you this location with this video that was created using Google Earth Studio. Benvenue is in the distance. We're looking toward Benvenue. The sloping hill is on the left. The peninsula is in the lower right. I'm going to move toward the peninsula, and the artist was standing just to the right of the peninsula, right about here. And you remember that tree? It's right about there. So, as I said in the introduction, this landscape is a good example where the artist changed the look of that landscape to make it appear more attractive or dramatic, in this case by exaggerating the size of the mountains and creating imaginary hills along the shoreline. Yet we were still able to identify the exact location of the artist and to distinguish between those landforms that are real from those that are the product of the artist's imagination.